Alabama for Nick Saban. Now, Phil Bennett knows Coach Saban very well over the years and has talked about him quite a bit. So, Phil, why? He said that today in an interview with Reese Davis that he could not answer anymore. Are you going to be around by the time I finish up my college career, 3 or 4 or 5 years? And that started to get to him a little bit.
Well, Smoak, for a fact these guys recruiting against him were absolutely using that. And I can imagine with the NIL and with all the different things. I happened to talk to Kevin Steele today, just called me out of the blue. And he told me, he said, I sort of felt like I pushed Coach when I went in there and told him before the bowl game that I'm probably going to wrap it up this year. And he told me, I'm envious of you. So I think it was a conglomerate of things that were going on. And I do know this. I bet it was hard for him after that last game to hang it up with that kind of loss.
Mm-hmm. Phil, how much – I mean, look, there's great coaches and then there's great coaches. And he is taking it to a level in a time where, look, there's scholarship limits and rules changes and things that weren't in place when Bear Bryant was coaching. Not that it doesn't make Bear Bryant less great, but the way he was able to do it and the way that no one else is really going to be able to match this, like how does that separate from, is it like kind of comparing like Tom Brady to Troy Aikman? They're both great, but one is greater?
Paul, you got to remember, and I remember when he took Alabama was down. Dennis Franchione had brought him up just a little bit. And Dennis had told me, because he was a friend of mine, he said, listen, it's an unbelievable job, but it is truly a 24/7 job. And Dennis couldn't handle the coping skills of it. Alabama, I think, is different than Texas. It's different than any other job because of what Coach Bryant did. And I think that when Nick took the job, just the way he handled things, he was able to take that program to a level nobody could see, but because it wasn't there at that time. And if people remember, and you might remember the Smoak, Northeast Louisiana beat them.
Yes.
Yes. But he had a plan, and he kept recruiting, and he hired good coaches, and he covered the bases. I think, without question, there's nobody that's done it to that level, to that degree, regardless of where they're at, over the past 17 years with what he's done.
Coach. Phil Bennett, former college football coach with us, longtime college football coach on 365 Sports.
Coach, from a fellow coach's perspective, I know you've kind of rattled some of it off there, but what impressed you most from a coach to coach, looking at how he did his job?
Nick, this is a sort of a long story, but I'm going to make it brief. Nick and I sort of grew up coaching together. And then back in the 80s, I was the defensive coordinator at Purdue. Nick was the defensive coordinator at Michigan State. We both recruited Chicago. So along with Barry Alvarez, a lot of the old guys that are closing it down there. And I think Nick was a year or two older than me. And one of the things that I always admired about him is his passion for football. He loved knowledge. There was a lot of clinics around the greater Chicago area that he and I did together. And he worked for the great George Perlis. And he was George Perlis' defensive coordinator. And Nick, even to the very end, when I was at Baylor, I tell the story about I was over in Freeport, and Billy Napier comes in, and he said, hey, you know who's out in the car? I said, who's in the car? He said, Coach Saban. I said, go get him. Tell him to come in. So Nick was sort of doing work. So he comes in, and the first thing he tells me, he said, Phil, he said, I want to get a clinic together. He goes, I want to, we're all having to face this no huddle stuff that Art does and all this. And he goes, let's get 4 or 5 guys, just a few. And he said, let's see the best answers to this. I mentioned it, Art, and Art said, hell no. You're not. He said, and I was excited about it. I didn't think of it. Of course, I'm a defensive guy. I didn't think of it that way. And when I told Nick, I called him. I said, well, Art, so he goes, I knew it. He said, they all think they got a damn secret, that it's some mystery. But I loved his passion for the game. I mean, he wasn't an executive coach. He was hands-on. Kevin Steele told me today that he would sit in there in the game plan, and he said, Phil, he's as sharp as he ever was. You know, his specialty was the back end, and just his knowledge and technique of how he taught those kids. I mean, he was truly a hands-on guy. Now, the other thing that I loved about him is he demanded excellence. Hey, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it 100%, and we're going to do it the best way. And you know, it's like Kevin said. He said, you know, some of us, he said, I think he told me, he said, you have this ability. He goes, you can eat a kid's ass out, and they still like you. Yep. He said, I can't do that. He said, when I do it, they get huffy and puffy. He said, Nick can do that. He said, it became a deal where our players knew that Nick kept us in line, that kept the players in line. He had a protocol, and you had to abide by that. And I think it's obvious. That's why they won close games, and that's why, you know, that he won 7 national championships.
There was a question asked of him when he took the job at Alabama. What would be the most difficult thing to get accomplished? And not that he thought it would be difficult, but because – and he said that there's only going to be one voice, that there's only his voice. That doesn't mean people can't tell him a coach is whatever, but it was him, and it would not be like this group of donors or whatever, no matter how many donors they had. How much does that make a difference?
Well, it's a presence. You talk about, you know, Smokey, you've seen people that when they walk in a room, they have a presence. Nick has that. And you know what? Greg Byrne, the athletic director, has told people, which I think the reason it was a great relationship, he says, I have so much confidence in Coach Saban going to do the right thing and the best thing for Alabama. I never question a thing he does. And trust me, that's a lot of confidence, is it not? Mm. And the relationship worked because he had a guy that was super, a detailed guy, covered every base. And the other thing you have to admire about Nick is he always respected the integrity of Alabama. And he wasn't ever going to put them in a position that would hurt their integrity and what they're about. And I think anybody that's ever dealt with him in any facet would tell you that.
Did you ever coach against him in a game, like when he was a head coach or just assistant coach?
Oh, yeah. Not when he was a head coach. I'll tell you a quick story, though. When I was in this is a true story. And my first year at Kansas State, and I was very close to Joe Dean, the longtime athletic director. We go 11-1. My wife dies. My wife is unfortunately killed. And I've got Sam and Maddie. I think they were 7 and 10. And, you know, the football season just saved me. Bill Snyder saved me. And we're coming back. My late wife's family were doctors in Alvarado, and we were coming back. We had just beat Missouri 66-0. Sam is a paper hound, sports hound, and he goes, Dad, they just fired Jerry DiNardo. I said, really? He goes, I bet you, Joe Dean, I bet you they call you. I started laughing. This is honest God truth. And this was probably about an hour outside of Oklahoma City. We're going through Oklahoma City, and my phone rings. And back then, cell, you know, it was 1999, and it was. He goes, Phil, Joe Dean, and that's how Joe talks. They call him the music man. He goes, the job's open. He said, I want to talk to you. He said, when can you? I told him what I was doing. He goes, I'm going to pick you up in Fort Worth. He goes, I'm going to fly you. We play Arkansas on Friday. And he said, you're going to be the last guy we interview. We're interviewing 3 guys. And I'm thinking, holy cow, Sam. Long story short, we go in. The chancellor offers me the job. And Joe Dean is all excited. I'm very close to him. I get cold feet. I don't think I can do it. You know, Sam and Maddie were just getting comfortable in Manhattan. Coach Snyder has been unbelievable. Got us a nanny. And so I call him and I said, Coach, I said, Mr. Dean, I can't do it. And my brother is sitting there. He's the head coach at Irving High, and he's shaking his head, thinking, God, what are you doing? But I just couldn't do it. And long story short, Joe, hung up. He's upset. Calls me the next day. He goes, help me with some names. We're going through the names. Well, honest to God, Nick had struggled a little bit at Michigan State. And I told him, I said, you ought to call Nick Saban. He goes, I thought about him. He said, he's from that area, actually I said he's from West Virginia. He's not like he's far north. And long story short, he gets a hold of Nick's agent. Next thing you know, Nixon is in LSU. And then Nick calls me. He goes, help me with some coaches. And I give him some names, and he hires one of them. Well, the coordinator lasted 2 weeks. I'm not going to give a name. This is a true story. And I get this call, and it's Nick. He said, come work for me. He goes, I'll treat you. I know you got the kids. You'll be on your time. I said, Nick, I'm staying at Kansas State. But he was good. And he was trying to get guys that had a background, and I'd been there. I'd had the number one defense in the SEC there. And I knew he would do well there, and he did. End up getting Jimbo Fisher, Muschamp, really had some good coaches, and end up leaving there and going to the Dolphins. And, just has had an all-star career. Has to be one of the all-time greats.
Coach, I know everybody's speculating on who the guy will be to replace the guy, and that's a big position. But Dan Lanning's already used this and leveraged it as the big recruiting pitch for Oregon, the fact that he's going to be sticking around despite the obvious interest there from Alabama. Did anybody initially pop into your head, or have you thought about it and thought about who might be, in your eyes, the best candidate? And could you please say Mike Norvell so we can watch Florida State alum Paul Catalina's head explode over here?
No. My guy's Dabo Sweeney. He is. I was coaching when Dabo played. I think Dabo over the last 9 or 10 years has had 9 of the 10 years he's had 10 wins. Run a program. He's learned. He's an Alabama guy. He was an all-conference receiver there. For whatever reason, that's who comes to my mind. He understands what Alabama's about, and I think. I really do. I think you have to understand what you're getting into. Dennis Francione told me one time, he said, Phil, I've never been anywhere. You can't even go out to eat. He said, Alabama fans are above and beyond anything that he told me he had ever seen. And trust me, he left Alabama to go to A&M to try to have a life outside of football. So I think it's got to be somebody that really understands what he's getting into, because that job, can eat you up.
I remember Alabama had a Learjet land at the airport in Tyler because Derek Farmer had taken a trip there, the former Lee running back. He had committed to A&M. Remember? He's a tough kid. And then eventually Francione goes to A&M, and that's where Farmer ended up signing on National Signing Day. But, he got
I remember that.
Got away from the crazy.
That. I told somebody, I said, what's crazy is, you dream. At the time, though, let's be honest, when Dennis took the job, it wasn't the job it is now. Whoever takes that job, it has to understand who they're following. Now, do I think that it can still be a great job? Absolutely. But, I've always told you guys this, coaching matters. And what Nick did and how he ran his program, it mattered. There's a reason why Alabama has done what it's done and the way they've done it. Kevin Steele told me, Phil, he said, I watched Nick go out and teach DB drills. He said, I swear to God, you would think he was 25 years old. He's backpedaling, he's braking, that's invigorating. And I know that's the aspect that Nick loved about the game. And some people say, well, what do you think happened? Why he's still healthy? And then I just think, truly, I do. I believe this NIL and the portal, I don't think that he believed he would still be around when it got fixed, because I think it has to get fixed. This thing is out of control.
Phil, one more question. You mentioned him, Kevin Steele. He had a bad time at Baylor. He was great before that. But he
Yes,
always
he did.
he was on a lot of great programs, hired him over and over and over again, including Saban 3 times.
What does that tell you? What does that tell you?
I was going to ask you about that. I know that sometimes around here it's a joke because of the UNLV game, but I like the guy. He was at Nebraska with Osborne. So your thoughts about what kind of career he had?
I'm 60. It's going to be 69. Kevin's, I think, 65. I've known him since he was a GA at Tennessee. Number one, he's one of the finest people you'll ever meet in your life. He is a football coach. He's diligent. He's a worker. He will tell you, unfortunately, we don't get to do do-overs. He would have do-overs when the Baylor wasn't quite right, didn't make, and Baylor was a different job at that time.
Sure.
It was. It really was. But look at his resume. I mean, look who he's worked for. Look at what he's a winner. And you ask Nick this year, who did he lean on the most about everything that was going on? This was one of his most gratifying years because new quarterback, new coordinator, get better on defense. And I'm gonna tell you, Kevin did a bang up job at Alabama this year to help them get to the Final Four. So everybody remembers what they want to remember, but I know him. I know what kind of guy he is. I know what kind of coach he is. He could coach any place I've ever been, and I would love to coach with him.
Saban, there's a quote from Stuart Mandel, and we got to let you go too. We appreciate it. Said that he was more involved with the defense this year. In quotations, put a little more stress on me, made me feel like maybe I wasn't doing as good a job as I needed to in other parts of our team. I just have a high standard for how I do things. If I don't feel like I'm living up, etc. That was about just taking over part of the team. That was not a shot at Steele, was it?
No.
Okay.
You
just
know
want to
why?
make sure, yeah.
Well, no. One of the things that happened, they had, and with the previous coordinator that had gone to Ole Miss, he wasn't pleased with the back end, with the secondary. And Kevin told me, Phil, he's running the secondary. He said, that's his baby. He said, but he's letting me tie it up. But Nick has always been involved with the defense, just like I would be. I mean, that's what he does. No, I don't believe, but I think he wanted to be involved because they had young corners, they had young safeties, and he was involved back there.
Coach, I have to ask you before we let you go. The national championship was played on Monday night. Jim Harbaugh in Michigan.
I went to it.
Yeah, okay.
I was right next to Michael Jordan and Jeter.
Oh, were you there?
Hey,
Yeah.
no kidding.
I knew some people who knew some people.
Well, yeah, clearly we saw. Yeah, there was a shot up there of Stephen A., MJ, and Jeter. We didn't catch you there. I need to look closer and go back and rewatch
I
that.
I was over there talking to Desmond Howard, telling him why Michigan was going to win.
Okay. Well, I mean, you were in the spot to be then, of all spots to be, for certain. But what was that like? And also, your thoughts on that game. Michigan winning the title, despite all the controversy during the season. Harbaugh and company getting it done over a very talented Washington team.
Well, first of all, Houston did an unbelievable job. The atmosphere was really good. It was a rainy night. It wasn't ideal setting, but they did a great job. The setup was exciting. The stadium was packed. Both teams were represented well, and it was really nice. I was able to sit in gallery furniture spots at the 45-yard line. And one of the things I told Desmond, I said it's going to be whether they can cover, and make Pence not be effective. And then the other thing, could Michigan do what they normally do in running the ball, which I thought they could. They did the first half. And I thought that sort of got Washington out of whack. I thought Jesse Minter, whose dad is a dear friend of mine, we played high school football against you. He's a good East Texas guy, Dave.
Is he from? Where's he from? Gladewater? Or
no? Rick Minter's from Texas High.
Oh, okay, all right.
That's his dad. His dad was a longtime head coach at Cincinnati. Good guy. Hell, we played each other. He still laughs. He said we both got kicked out of a game because he was holding me and I kicked him. but anyway, they did a great job defensively, and they ran the ball. Now I got to give Washington credit. They made some good changes at halftime, did a good job stopping the run. And I'm telling you, if the 48-yard pass would have been able to stand, I thought that was a very questionable holding call. That could have been a really special finish.
Thank you, man. Great. Glad your voice is better, too. You're feeling better.
Hey, I was going to tell him you sort of cut me off real fast last week.
Well,
I hope you don't do your women like that.
No.
When they're not exactly to your liking.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Now I'm going to tell my dicks that I have something in common. Oh, my
All right.
All right, buddy. Thank you very much, Phil Bennett. Longtime coach from all of the various angles of who it might be. And DeBoer